Kicking things off in episode 3, the Barra is ready to be test fitted into the engine cavity of the Bedford. The Barra is first lowered onto Al's ancient workbench and then can be positioned underneath the hoist so the car can be lowered down on top. This will give us an idea whether the inlet and exhaust manifolds are going to fit and just a general idea of where the engine is going to sit. Just when we take some Instagram photos and
call it done.
Post it for sale, 99% complete.
Yep. It's actually where we remove everything and make it all again. Well, that's all right. That's how we roll.
What do you mean by remove everything?
Inlet and exhaust manifold.
What are you going to do to them?
Don't know yet. Modify them.
Put the throttle body on the bottom?
Yeah, probably put the throttle on the bottom or the side.
The Bedford is raised back up on the hoist, and Al and I gambled to pick which side of the motor we want to work on.
You cheated.
Both the inlet and exhaust manifolds have to be removed so we can get the engine to sit higher. We may get away with still using the exhaust manifold and spacing the turbo down, but the inlet manifold will have to be custom made.
Oh, the Loctite. There's a washer.
You dropped that, or is that previous?
Previous.
Struggling, Al.
Loctite exhaust manifold bolts. Oh, that one feels like it's going to snap. It's all right, it's only the one that you can't get at with a socket.
It's taking you so long, bro. I thought you said this was the hard side.
Shut up.
Fancy logs, Alan.
Yep, does the job. Finally got the big girl to fit in the car. Only required a small amount of cutting and removal of everything off the side of the engine, which is, you know, a good sign. It's pretty much par for the course. So we've made a bit of a plan. I lowered the engine right down and took some measurements, and basically we just need this to fit over the engine crossmember front suspension assembly whilst still fitting up inside the car. So the inlet manifold won't allow that, so we remove that. We don't have much choice of that. We're going to have to modify that and sort of make a new one that's the plenum's down here instead. You know, I prefer not to have to do it, but that's just how it is. Exhaust manifold is going to be okay, but we will have to put a spacer on the turbo and move the turbo down further because the floor on the driver's side's about here. So that's our main problems are just the floor height, because we can't cut the floor any wider than it already is. Like, this is its standard cut. and we don't want to go wider because that's obviously where your feet go. So we're just going to do that. Engine mounts, this is the FG Falcon, so it's a pretty late model Falcon. It's only a few years old. It's got some weird engine mounts that bolt onto the side. They're stupid looking things. We can't really use them. So I went to the wreckers and got some BA mounts. That's the earlier model that also has this engine. It's just got a normal standard pin mount, which is good. So we're just going to modify them a bit to go on the block. They did change the block a little bit. We're going to use these engine mounts there, just Patrol, readily available, built to handle a big motor. Got a reasonable amount of cushion as well, as opposed to a shackle mount that has nothing. Because the engine's so close to you in the car, we want to sort of cushion it a little bit to keep the vibrations to a minimum. Otherwise, it'll be awful to drive. So that'll go on there. That'll go on there. Then we have to make some modifications to the crossmember to meet up to that, to hold the engine weight. We looked at mounting the engine off the frame rails, but they're not really built for that, and it is a pretty big engine and box. So, the front suspension unit is really big and strong. It's built to hold basically all the weight of the engine and the suspension at the same time. So I gave Matt a call and said, come and tell me what to do, because he's the boss at that. So he dropped over last night, and we made a plan, which I'll talk about in a second. The transmission mount, I'm going to use what I refer to as a hang mount. That's how they mount a lot of transmissions in vans, Japanese vans. They basically hang it from the floor, so it's a sort of a cotton reel type mount that is failure proof. Basically, even if it wore out, it can't fall off. So that's going to go up here. We've got a bit of channel that'll actually slip over the top of that, and we can either bolt or weld it to that. And then this bolts to it. So we've got that sort of planned out, and then we just make a bracket off the back of the transmission. The ZF box is it's kind of like made to take a transfer case or whatever they bolt them up to. It's a fairly widely used transmission, so we'll make a bracket off that then bolts through to that, so it just hangs from the floor. So we've kind of got it all planned out now. We just have to do tons of work, so we better get into it.
That turbo looks brand new, eh, Al?
It probably is, because it's probably blown up already.
Are they not a very good turbo?
No, that's just not a very good application by Ford, because they managed to make them block up their oil feeds and all sorts of crazy that doesn't normally happen. I think we need to bring it back down, back onto the crossmember.
Al positions the engine on the crossmember and supports it in place using some trusty chocks of wood. Once he's happy with the position, he checks to make sure it's level and straight before starting on the engine mounts.
So we're level, it's straight. Now we make engine mounts?
Yeah. As I mentioned before, Matt came over last night, and I begged him to tell me how to mount this engine, because it's not the easiest thing in the world. You can see the crossmember's a long way away from the engine mount. And his suggestion was to use some thick wall like steam pipe. These were bent up to make a chassis rail for a hot rod. They were like test bends, so there's something reasonably strong. So his idea was we drill through the cross member and right through to the other side, and that will then go through the cross member. Gets welded on either side. It then stands up like that, has a platform on it for that engine mount to meet up. Then it has a reinforcing plate that comes down the side here and down onto the top of the cross member there. So here's Matt's artistic impression of it. As you can see, it's very detailed and confusing, but he knows what he's talking about. So I'm just going to do as I'm told in this case. As you can see, there's my artistic impression. I drew a turbo. I think that's pretty good.
That's a pretty fancy dump pipe there, Al.
You are correct. Ford has done a cracker job of that.
Yeah, the dump pipe goes down, what was it, 2.5 inch or something? 2 and 3/4?
No, it's a 3-inch exhaust, but they've just put like a restrictor inside the pipe just to be complete. Probably to take some resonant frequency out of it or something. But most people put 4-inch exhaust on these things because
That's what you got to do to make power, isn't it?
yeah, yep. It's like a Land Cruiser. You got to put 4-inch on, otherwise you got nothing. But that's going to stay because that's really good and heaps big enough for this engine. So.
And what size turbo is that?
It's a GT3576. So they used to have GT3582s on them in the earlier models, but when they changed to FG, they downsized the compressor because it was obviously that's got enough flow to make the power that they want, and only the FPV performance versions had a bigger turbo on them, the same old 3582. But the beauty of these is you can just buy a GDX Supercore, undo the, take it off, smash a big turbo, new core on it, and they make really good power. They're pretty well equipped for a stocker engine.
It's not the same as what the Crester's got, yeah?
No, it's a GDW.
Okay, my bad.
Yeah. Brush up on your turbo homework. You should ask someone who knows.
Maybe I should.
Using some 6mm plate steel, I make up the engine mount platform that our patrol engine mount rubbers will bolt to. Al then marks out the ideal spot for the thick-walled tube to go through the crossmember and cuts out a passage using a 22mm hole saw. The tube is cut to size and any items that require welding are clean. Al then places the tube in through the crossmember and double checks the position and level of the engine before getting the MIG out and tack welding it all into place. the engine is removed back off the crossmember and lowered back onto the workbench, while Al finishes welding up the new engine mount brackets. Once he's done, it's jacked up and secured onto a gearbox jack so it can be easily positioned into place to bolt up to the underside of the car. The Bedford is lowered back down on top of the engine and the crossmember carefully lined up. Once it's flush, it's given 3 ugga-duggas with the rattle gun.
So now what, Al?
Get inside the car and with a bit of big board and sling down, and we'll hold the box up with it.
What, like a tow rope or something?
No, like a ratchet strap.
It's a pretty heavy duty ratchet strap you got there, Al.
I got it off some goose. Sturdy?
You tell me.
I think the gearbox weighs more than the engine. I don't know what they put inside it, but it's goddamn heavy.
Now can we take Instagram photos?
It's finished. Is that legit?
You tell me, is it legit? Looks pretty legit. Apart from there's no turbos or anything on there.
Well, there's no inlet manifold doesn't fit, and the exhaust doesn't fit.
What about the computer? What computer are we using in this?
It's a surprise. Surprise!